Thank you, and welcome to the first panel discussion of this conference titled Establishing a Safe Environment in Syria as a Policy Imperative. I think that conversation that we are about to have could have hardly been framed more impactfully than what we have just heard in the beginning. And I must say, on a personal note, I'm a Bosnian, and I think that as Bosnians, we have greatly benefited from a particular moment in history where we at least did see some accountability for the crimes that were committed in order to displace the majority of Bosnian population. And to see someone who is supposed to be a witness because of a heroic act of smuggling out evidence of these horrendous crimes, having to hide in this way and not actually able to take part in this conference for exactly these reasons, that it's a high security threat, I think tells us the difference between times in which we live today and in which we as Bosnians benefited from the accountability of the international system, but also our own. And I think that this frames the conversation about why the establishment of safe environment in Syria is not simply a humanitarian issue, but it is a policy imperative. And it is a policy imperative, first and foremost, for Syrians. And I very much like what Mr. Othman said. I don't think that Syrians need to apologize for displaying the state in which they live, displaying the injustice that they face, because very often we tend to somehow try and close our eyes to this horrendous reality when we try to talk about Syria. And I think that that is possibly one of the greatest problems that we are facing. But it is also a policy imperative for host countries that are hosting Syrian displaced. It is a policy imperative for Europe, very clearly, and it is a policy imperative for other key states involved in the Syrian crisis. I will try to speak as little as possible because I think we have an impressive panel to discuss this. I will just introduce everyone very briefly. You can find detailed biographies of all our speakers on the website of the conference on the Syrian Association for Citizens' Dignity web presentation. And to my left, Dr. Hala Gavi. She is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Syrian Association for Citizens' Dignity. Michael Keating, whom you've already heard speak, he's the Executive Director of the European Institute for Peace. Dr. Najat Roshdi, who is Deputy Special Envoy on Syria, and Ambassador Omer Onhon, who is former Ambassador of Turkey to Syria. So the panel will unfold in the way that we will have a 40 or so minutes, because we are already running a bit late, of questions that I will pose to the panelists and maybe discussion between them. Please feel free to comment on anything that your fellow panelist says. And then we will open it to your questions and answers. And also, very importantly, to questions and of the online participants, because as was said already, we have more than 100 people who are participating in the conference online. Not only people who are following the conference online, but actually participating in from various different civil society organizations, Syrian associations, governments, and international organizations. So I more than welcome their questions and contributions as well. So without further ado, the first question that I will ask will be directed to Dr. Halagawi. And my direct question would be, why is establishing a safe environment as defined by Syrians themselves in the position paper that we are all referring to, roadmap to a safe environment in Syria, which you as participants should have received by email, but also is available now on the website. Why is this key to any hopes for safe, dignified, and voluntary return of displaced Syrians?
Thank you. Thank you. I will talk in Arabic. إذا تخيلنا فقط وجود نساء وأطفال وعوائل.
The presence of families, women and children under severe conditions in these camps. So why would those people be able to return to the territories under the sovereignty of the Syrian regime? Why do they want to go back? They are living under severe humanitarian conditions in these camps, but there is something that is worse in case they return to their homes or to the areas they have deserted. Safe environment is not only a nomenclature that we have invented as Syrians. It is one of the basic human rights of human rights. It cannot be separated from any political process or any conditions for a political process in Syria. Even the Norwegian Center for Refugees, if these conditions persist, more than 6 million Syrians will be displaced during the 6 years to come, or the 10 years to come. So these waves of displaced persons, how could they hinder the return of those Syrians and would create instability in the region or in Europe even? 82% of the Syrians that have been covered by this survey are requesting the change of the regime in order for them to return, not only as a political nomenclature, but it has to do with legal, economic, social conditions existing right now. So, from the point of view of Syria, in order to leave my country, I cannot imagine my return without providing the necessary conditions for a safe environment. It's not the usual dangers, including death, for example. But my colleague has said that the mothers are asking their children to never go back to Syria. They are forced to be displaced. Many other Syrians are waiting for the moment to leave Syria. So how could 60% of the Syrians are just waiting for the opportunity to leave Syria? Thank you.
I think that this is a key issue that I want to follow up on. And just very recently, 2 weeks ago, we have seen the association publish a briefing about the position and attitudes of Syrian refugees in Lebanon. This comes as Lebanon, its government has announced that it will start returning Syrians to Syria. The Syrians in Lebanon are facing an extremely difficult condition. People are not allowed to work. They live in horrendous accommodation in tents, camps that recently have caught fire in many incidents. Children cannot access education. It's a desperate situation. Yet, over 70% of people that we spoke to said that they would never return in the status quo. Half of those 70% said that they would try to make it to Europe, even if it meant risking their lives and lives of their families on these death boats. And the other half said that they would try to hide in Lebanon if they were forced to return. Why is this? How do you explain, based on the work that you have done, that we are facing a situation where people are being forced to return into a situation which they fled from, and are willing to risk their lives in order not to return? That's for you, Dr. Khalid. Yes.
I believe that the main difference, or let me say, the point of view of the international community of a safe environment is completely different from what has been being propagated for. The participation and the inclusion of the Syrian people in decisions that has to do with a safe environment, even in the neighboring countries or in the UN organizations, this is the main crux of the matter. We have to identify the safe environment from the point of view of the Syrians and from the perspective of the international community. What we say as safe return, let me put it in other words, it is a compulsive return, regardless of the different divisions and in all parts of Syria. But just because there is no bomb shelling, the absence of bomb shelling doesn't necessarily mean a safe environment. And this argument has been used with some Syrians who were displaced out of Damascus, saying that there is no bomb shelling of Damascus. The safe environment necessitates the absence of all kinds of dangers, be it psychological, security, social. The safe environment should ensure my rights, the rights of human beings, the right to freedom of expression. The safe environment secures me the right not to be oppressed and not to be imprisoned. This is exactly what we are suffering from as Syrians as a result of the different definitions of a safe environment, because any potential political solution in Syria or any political approach that is not based on the aspirations of the Syrian people, actually this is what we see in many policies adopted by the UN, by not involving the Syrian people in the crux of the matter. In order to achieve a safe environment, lies in the voices of the real Syrians in their simple language that should be understood by the international community, that is based on practical measures for a political solution. It should never be based on some theoretical ideas of accounting or holding the regime to be accountable. The document adopted by SACD has to do with a comprehensive solution for the Syrian issue, and not to have new waves of displacement. This is what we think is the right approach.
I will come back to that because I think that it is very important to note that the document that everybody is talking about, in fact, is a result of more than 2 years of conversations exactly with the people that you are talking about, which then have been translated into policy language by experts like Dr. Abdul Hamid Awak and others. And I think that, again, this is what I have remarked as a Bosnian, as compared to the document which governed the safe environment, if you want, or the rights of the displaced Bosnians in the Dayton Agreement. It is infinitely more detailed, precise, and substantive in terms of what Syrians need to see before, during, and after return. And this is why I think this gathering is so important. But I will move to Michael Keating. European Institute for Peace is a presence in the conversation about Syria and how to address the rights of displaced people for a number of years. That is, I have to say, how I got involved in this conversation, and I'm thankful for that. And my question on the basis of that experience to you, Michael, would be, how would you define and describe why is the establishment of safe environment in Syria a political and a policy imperative rather than purely a humanitarian imperative?
Yeah, press that. In a way, I thank you for the question, but I feel that the answer has been provided so eloquently by our Syrian colleagues that I can only, repeat some of the things that they have said. And I suspect you will address this issue as well. I mean, as I mentioned in my remarks, quoting the special envoy, a priority has to be to establish a safe, calm, neutral environment, starting with confidence building measures as in resolution 2254. If any progress is going to be made, given the stalemate in the political discussions. I think this is one of the few areas, but I do defer to you because you're more plugged into the daily discussions than I am. But I think it's one of the few areas where there is scope for, wiggle room is probably the wrong expression, but there is scope for conversations, there's scope. And, the one comment I would make is that sometimes, even in the most moments of greatest political gridlock, you nevertheless need to be prepared for the possibility of a political opening. And even if it is not entirely clear how this is going to feed into high-level political discussions on a solution in Syria, having this on the table in front of everybody both has a psychological effect, but is also going to be extremely useful should things unblock, which they may not, but stranger things have happened. And we're living in a very kind of strange moment in geopolitical affairs. We are not quite sure how the Ukraine war is going to unfold, whether that is going to create strange new coalitions and opportunities, depending on how it goes. There is a concern, of course, that the Ukraine war will be as prolonged and intractable as the one we have in Syria. But other possibilities are also on the table. And having this input from Syrian civil society is incredibly important in terms of providing very practical suggestions as to what the shape of a political, the elements of a political settlement inside Syria could look like. So, it isn't just a humanitarian issue. This is about, what should Syria look like from the perspective of those who have been most damaged and affected by this conflict, and what is absolutely necessary if a political settlement is going to last, let alone a just political settlement, but one that is going to have a chance of actually surviving. So I do think it's a very important political input. It's not just a sort of technical thing that the humanitarians should look at before. I also hope that host countries, which, as I said, have been very generous in many towards refugees, but are under huge pressures now, will also take account of this, and they will do so, and do so from a political perspective.
I could ask you 100 questions based on what you just said, to use your presence and knowledge here to unpack some of these things. But let me ask a general one before, just tying in with what you said. What will it take for key states, key actors, to recognize that this has to be taken into account? It has to be taken into account now, that forced return will only create more instability and new waves of displacement. You have contact with people in governments. What do you think will it take?
I think if they think that this is in their core interests and that this is better than the alternative, they will take it very seriously. And their core interests include security. Their core interests can be economic. Their core interests can be several other, the social pressure on their own societies. And if they believe that something like this is fundamental to the realization of their core interests, and that the alternative is much worse, then they will take it seriously. I think, therefore, articulate voices pointing out the political and security and economic benefits of these measures to them, let alone to Syrians, that's going to be of interest to them. But it's a tough sell.
Please go ahead before I go to Dr. Rosh.
صراحة بالإضافة إلى ما تم ذكر.
In addition to what has been said, the key political issues that should reach the international community in terms of decision making is to involve those who committed crime. And here I mean Russia, the crimes that have been perpetrated by Russia in Syria with the support of the Syrian regime. Russia was a partner in these crimes. And even in Ukraine, what we see in Ukraine is fundamental. So the partner in crime is a guarantor in order for them to return, and the international community should look into the interests of the regime and its allies. The reconciliation regions are under threat, are the most threatened in terms of the return. And the third point is the safe environment was emanating from Resolution 2254 that was trying to create the political atmosphere in order to achieve human rights and peace. So the safe environment is not only based on theories, but it emanated from the Geneva Declaration and from the Resolution 2254.
Thank you. And I think this is a great way to segue into your kind of possibly the most important segment of this panel, because you are Deputy Special Representative for Syria, Special Envoy for Syria, and the task is to facilitate the political process. Tell us, what is the political process that we are talking about now, and where does the establishment of the safe environment fit into that process?
Well, thank you very much, Yatik Al-Afi, Dr. Hala. Michael, very good seeing you again. I mean, we always end up meeting as the usual suspect, trying to address very important issues. I did not want to interrupt you, Dr. Hala, when you were speaking, because obviously the raison d'etre of the Office of the Special Envoy is really to listen and to amplify the voices of the Syrian people wherever they are. And when it comes to their safety, when it comes to their rights, when it comes to their dignity, I can assure you, we are putting that at the center of whatever we do in terms of implementation of the Resolution 2254. But if I have to explain what is the political process before getting to the point where we explain where is the political process, I will tell you, and Michael was nice and generous enough actually to quote the Special Envoy when he was referring to the neutral environment. What is the political process considering as a conducive environment for the return of the IDPs and the refugees, because we really have to address them both, especially when you know that more than half of the population are IDPs and refugees. And if we are really to help and facilitate the building and the contribution to a lasting peace and a sustainable peace, and sorry, also to use sustainable development, we need all the Syrians to put all hands on deck actually to do it. And therefore, when this is addressed at the level of our office, but also at the level of all UN agencies and at the level of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres himself, we are really, and allow me to read, just for me not to forget, what is there. The first one is about nationwide ceasefire. This is very important. And I know and I understand and I hear the frustration. We are not saying that everything is perfect, but was it important actually to get into the negotiation? The international community got in with, of course, the facilitation of United Nations in getting a ceasefire here and there. Is it frustrating not to get everything as everybody wished? Yes. Is it important to still get it the way that we have much less, civilians who are killed? Absolutely, yes. So while the negotiations and are not always addressing all the expectations, they are still needed. And what the international community is doing, what the United Nations is doing, while maybe not covering and meeting all the needs and the expectations, it's still needed. Whatever we are doing to implement the Resolution 2254 is still needed. And so far, there has not been any alternative to protect the civilian. And protecting civilian is not a mission, it's a duty. And it's a collective duty for everybody, no matter where they are, no matter their function, no matter their country. protection is a duty for all of us. Second, compliance with international law. We are United Nations, and as such, we are a gatekeeper of the international law, including the international humanitarian law, without bringing the conversation to humanitarian. Nevertheless, IHL is very important also because, and I was very pleased actually to see a lot of commonalities between your paper and the IHL. And let me just clarify, when you say that return, we need to involve the Syrian, obviously. That's also the way we do it. That's the process we do it when United Nations is supporting return. There is a before return, a during return, and after return. So it's a process. It's not a one-off action. It's really a process. And we involve whoever wants to return first to verify the willingness to return, and therefore to make sure it is indeed voluntary, on voluntary basis, and there is absolutely no pressure or no, nothing that is put on the person or on the family for them to go back. So that's the first, and it's really mandatory. It's a must. Otherwise, United Nations will never be part of this process. During, it's really in terms of protecting, meaning that it's not that, refugees or IDPs are sent back, just putting them in, providing transportation and then sent back. No, there is a real protection procedure to make sure that they arrive safely. Third, it's really very important as part of the verification process to make sure that those people, when they go back on voluntary basis with the support regarding transportation and everything, that it is safe and that none of them is going to be arrested. None of us in United Nations, whether we are political or humanitarian or development, would like to be part of anything that would lead to violation of human rights or unsafety of any of the people who are returning. The confidence building measures are also part of the political process. Of course, you know that the file of the missing and the detainees is really very high in the agenda of the special envoy and part of the resolution 2254, and obviously the safe and voluntary refugee and IDP return with all the conditions and criteria that are very well known, safe, dignified, and voluntary on voluntary basis.
Again, I wish that this session was 10 hours long so that I could ask you all the questions that I have. I'm sure that others have many, but just very briefly before I ask the next question, unfortunately, the reality is that UNHCR has admitted itself that it has no way of monitoring when people go back, that it doesn't have access to many of those who we can say that they voluntarily return, but we know what forced them to choose that voluntary return, including the people who are now voluntarily returning from Lebanon. We have documented, when I say we, the association, but also Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, arbitrary arrest, enforced disappearance, murder, extortion, torture of returnees, people who have nominally voluntarily returned without any ability for UNHCR to actually monitor what happens to them. And I think that is the core reason that the foundation of this document and foundation of everything I've heard from Syrians in the last 3 years is that there has to be a political agreement on return which guarantees the rights of returnees and is implemented with robust international guarantees. How do you think we can achieve that political agreement?
You know, how can we achieve any political agreement? I think this one is definitely a bit more complicated, and I have to say it comes with a lot of human suffering, and nobody should really discard that, because the suffering of the Syrian people since all those years is really very, very heavy. But it's through political negotiations, you know. I mean, it's with Michael. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago. It was there. Do you know the WIIFM concept? What is in for me? You know, you approach differently, different processes. But in our case, everything is already there in the resolution 2254. One of the things that are really predominant, and we tend to forget it, is really the inclusive dialogue, and to bring the voices of the Syrian people to the political process. So it's not only the special envoy, you know, discussing with the state or with the government, but it's really feeding back after meeting with the Syrian people into this conversation and with the other parties to make sure that we are there to facilitate also a Syrian dialogue. I don't believe in any lasting peace or lasting political process without having the people concerned being part of it and being architect of it.
Before I go to the ambassador, do you think Syrians are adequately represented in the political process? The people.
Why do you think they are not?
I have an answer to that. I'm asking you, do you think they are properly represented as it stands?
What I can tell you is that through the different bodies we have, you know, the Women Advisory Board, the Civil Society Room, who I really need to commend them and to really express all my admiration for the level of commitment of the Syrian, but also the level of expertise. There is a lot, you know, there is a room for them really to express their voices. If your question is about the Constitutional Committee, this is beyond, you know, that was a discussion, that there was an agreement. Is everybody represented there? No, because that was the way it was agreed, having representatives from the government and representative from the opposition. I mean, now, do you accept that this is the opposition? That's a different story.
Thank you. Let me go to the ambassador, Dr. Halle, and then Ambassador, we are hearing from everybody here that the key word for getting the key states to discuss and perhaps agree on a political solution that would guarantee the rights of people before they return is interest. What, in your opinion, is the interest of Turkey in establishing a safe environment in Syria?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, Turkey is, I would say, the most affected country with the crisis in Syria. And this is only normal as we share a common border of 911 kilometers. And everything that has happened in Syria has affected us in Turkey directly. In terms of security, in terms of Syrians coming into Turkey economically, socially, culturally, and so on. So, you know, for the Syrian people, it has been a big tragedy that words really fail to describe. And I have been in Damascus when everything started, and unfortunately, I followed the events escalate into what it is now. It is really the worst human tragedy. And if we organize hundreds of meetings like that a day, it would not appease the pains of the Syrian people. I have to say that. Now, Turkey wants a solution in Syria, but Turkey doesn't want a solution to save the day. There has to be a sustainable solution. Now, you asked the question, you said that there must be a political agreement. Actually, there is a political agreement. And that is, as you said, 2254. 2254 is the accumulation of the Geneva 1 meeting, Geneva 2 meeting, Vienna Declaration, and then numerous meetings in New York and other places. And one thing very important with 2254 is that it contains all the references and parameters for a solution. I mean, there is lots of diplomacy, diplomatic niceties, words, and so on. But pick out the operational sentences, make a list out of them, and you will see that everything there, I mean, everything which is needed for sustainable peace in Syria is in that document. And everybody has agreed to it, by the way, explicitly or implicitly, including the Assad regime, including Hezbollah, including Russia, including Iran. So that's the document that enjoys, I would say, support of everybody, willingly or unwilling. But they have said, yes, we will go along the lines contained in this particular document. What is important, what is missing actually, is the political will to implement it. I mean, we really appreciate the efforts of the special envoy and his team, but there is only so much that the UN and its special envoy can do. As long as the member countries lack a vision and the political will, what can the UN do? I mean, look at Russia, for example. Russia has been a country which has prevented everything in the United Nations since the beginning. And by the way, I agree with everything that Mrs. Gawi has said. Russia has played an extremely destructive role in Syria and continues to play a role in Syria. Some people claim that, well, the war in Ukraine has diverted the attention of Russia to other places from Syria. That's not correct. Only a week ago, they bombed Idlib, almost at the 0 kilometer of the border, refugee camps, Syrian camps. I mean, these are really some very dangerous and I would say ugly moves even. Now, Turkey wants a solution, but we do not want, as I said, a solution for the sake of a solution. It has to be sustainable. Someone said that if we go for a solution which will not be lasting, then we will be facing even a bigger problem in a week's time, in a month's time, or something like that. But then, again, I very much agree that people mean and understand different things from the same phrase. When you talk about safe environment for a Syrian is something else. A safe environment for a Turk is something else. A safe environment for, I don't know, whoever is something else. So I think it will be quite difficult in coming up with a common definition of a safe environment because it emanates from the need of each party that uses that phrase.
That is a very important point, and especially in the context of what I unfortunately have to say personally see as an increasing polarization and even dehumanization, I would say, in the public discourse of Syrian refugees in Turkey because of the politicization of the issue and all this, which places people in a state of fear and pressure in terms of their future. What would it take, in your opinion, for Turkey, for the government and the public at large, people who are thinking about Syria, who are looking for solutions, to take the views of displaced Syrians captured in this position paper in terms of defining what the safe environment means, to come to the same page, as you said, in order for the implementation of this safe environment to become more realistic?
Well, I mean, let me say a few words on the issue of fear and pressure. Now, Turkey has been hosting 3.7, maybe even more Syrians in Turkey, and as you know, we have applied an open door policy, the so-called open door policy, and we have 3.6, 3.7, even more Syrians in Turkey today. sometimes there is almost an impression that Turkey is going to put the Syrians in the buses and send them back to Syria. That's not the case at all. But what we should draw attention to is the following. Now, Syrians in Turkey are there on a temporary basis. They have not come to Turkey to settle there and to become Turkish citizens and live forever in Turkey. No, they have come there temporarily out of need. And as soon as the conditions back in their home country allows them to return, which I know that there are many different views on that, they will eventually return. 3.7 million of them, of course not, some will remain. But what I think Turkish politicians and officials are trying to make the following point. The status is temporary, and eventually they will return back, be it in months, be it in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and so on. Now we are in the wake of elections. In May or June, there are elections in Turkey. It's only normal, I think, that some politicians use some words which could be understood in a different way. But there is no way, I think, that Turkey will ask or push the Syrians to go back to Syria against their own will. I mean, that would be something very much contrary to the principles that we have been implementing from the very beginning. And I don't think that this is something which will change even if there is a change of government. Now, it all comes back to, is Syria safe to go back to? I mean, watching what we watched a few minutes ago, definitely everybody should require a guarantee that when they go back to Syria, they will not be killed, they will not be bombed, they will not be imprisoned, and so on. Now, is it possible with the Assad regime? Personally, if you ask me, the record of the regime does not give this confidence. Now, the other thing is, does the regime want the Syrians to return back? I don't think so. Why should it? It has a very small, 60% or whatever portion of the country under its control, and that's enough for it because it has established its economic system. It has established the exact system that it had in 2011. And many of the people who left Syria, not all of them have left for opposing Assad, by the way. Some of them have left for economic reasons. Some of them have left for fear of radicals in the north. Some of them have left for not wanting to be drifted into the army and so on. But the majority don't have sympathies for Assad. Now, would Assad like to have at least 5 or 6 million people who are against him to be back in Syria? Or would he want, under the economic conditions, 5 or 6 million people, more mouths to feed? I don't think so. So the problem is, the solution is not in Turkey. The solution is not in Switzerland. The solution is in Syria. The solution is at the source. And unfortunately, in Damascus, we have a system or an approach which will not say yes to anything which would lead to sharing power. Now, as I said, in 2254, we have all the parameters, but what do these parameters imply, or rather state? They state that the Syrian people will decide the fate of the country. Now, the problem with the Assad regime in 2011 was that they did not want to give anything to the demonstrators or to the people on the street, because that would mean sharing power, and sharing power eventually would lead to losing power. Now, nothing has changed, I think, in the mind of the regime today. So I think the solution for all of that is the implementation of 2254 in the right way, and the international community pushing pushing for a solution on that basis.
Thank you, Ambassador. I agree with this last point, and this is where I think this intervention by the association and displaced Syrians in terms of formulating what the reference to the safe environment in 2254 in reality means is so hugely important. And I just want to say, I know that Dr. Hala and Dr. Rojdi want to intervene and comment on something, but we are now opening the floor to discussions. We already have 2, 3, 4, and 5 questions. I would like to ask you, please, as a moderator, I'm not going to stop anyone from talking. We will, yes, I noted, we will treat each other with respect and dignity, but try to be brief and ask a question also, because we also have people online who would like to ask questions, so we would like to give them that opportunity. So before I go to the first 2 questions, please, very briefly, your comments, Dr. Hal and then Dr. Rashdi.
دكتورة نجاة أو أستاذة نجاة، أنا حابة أحكي أتفهم تماماً.
I fully understand the intentions and the mechanisms of the UN in Syria, but there are many loopholes in the policy undertaken towards Syria.
Can somebody help from?
Yeah, because translation is happening. So just if somebody can help. Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me now? There have been humanitarian assistance according to a Security Council resolution, and we all know that there are many controls. Since 2013, the international community had the chance to take real measures, but no serious steps have been taken regarding the Caesar file. So, unless it is within the Security Council, and I believe that this should be well revised in the dynamics and mechanisms used by the United Nations. With regard to what has been said by His Excellency, the Ambassador of Turkey in Syria, I fully understand the desire to help Syrians, and I fully understand the heavy burden shouldered by Turkey. But there have been many disappointments and frustrations by the Syrians as that could be interpreted as impeding the exit out of Syria or the return into Syria. The Syrians under the regime are not escaping out of fear, but they are leaving the country for economic purposes in order for them to achieve a better living condition and to provide their children with better opportunities. So this comprehensive outlook is an essential part and parcel of any solution in order to cover all those living in Syria. Dr. Raj. Of course, as a United Nations, we cannot work outside the Security Council. We have to be realistic. We cannot work otherwise. Yes, there are many attempts to reform the Security Council, but we have to deal with actual facts and the status quo. We cannot work otherwise. The umbrella we are working under is the resolution 2254. So if we are to deal with the return to a safe environment and the voluntary return as stipulated in Resolution 2254 was part and parcel of the group of steps regarding the political march. For example, many has talked about the Constitutional Council, and we used to tell them that this is the comprehensive solution. And according to Resolution 2254, it consists of so many other points. The second thing is the trust.
Whether when it comes to the political process, whether when it comes to the international community, whether when it comes even the Syrian among them between different regions. I am meeting with many of them coming from different regions, and it's really amazing how sometimes it's very difficult actually to bring them to agree on something. That said, I have seen also those same Syrian who did not agree on a number of things still agree on one thing. They all want a sustainable future. They all want the Syrian to go back. They all want one Syria and not different Syrias. They all want territorial integrity, and they all want sovereignty of Syria to be respected and acknowledged. Okay? And there is no way to get to that if actually we are not doing it through a comprehensive political solution. Is it frustrating? I can assure you. I mean, in many cases and every day, I think all of us here, we can share the same frustration. But the status quo would be a disaster. It will be just a disaster for everybody and for the Syrian to start with. So there is no way to stop this process and to stop having this opening, which is really critical. Is this opening tomorrow going to provide more space? We are doing everything possible to push for that, moving from a process to another, but still under the resolution 2254. And I say it again and again and again. When I met with the Syrian, and every time I meet with the Syrian, كلهم بيقولوا لي نفس الشيء. بيقولوا لي يا نجاة احنا تعبنا أن لما بنحكي عن
They tell me that when we speak of Syrians, either he is a perpetrator or is a victim. No, the Syrians, they have dignity, they have allegiance, they want to return to their homes. And as the Vice Special Envoy, I please ask you to work together with us because Syria deserves better.
Ask everybody to just announce their name and affiliation if they have any, and we will go with to 5 questions in the room. Hopefully, we can get in time to have lunch before you get angry.
Abdelhamid Awad.
My name is Abdelhamid Awad. I'm a professor at the university. Actually, I wanted to comment on what has been said by the ambassador in terms of the different visions. We as Syrians, we need to convince others of our point of view because each and everyone has his own perspective, and so the safe environment has to be well defined. There has been a mention of reconstruction as a prerequisite. It comes first, but there might have been another point of view by Europe. In light of all these divergent points of view, I am one of the partners here, and I need to return. So I have to have the free will to return. And I'm telling you, these are my conditions. So what is the reference here? Is it the international law? Regarding the safe environment, and here I'm speaking from a legal point of view. When we submit this document, will the United Nations look into this document? How do you weigh it out? Will you take our point of view, or should we resort to international law and that's it?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you for all the valuable information. As a matter of fact, we have been told that all UN dynamics should be coherent. And in the light of this stalemate, and in view of the fact that no improvements or no progress has been achieved so far, with regard to the safe return in item 14 of resolution 2254, and when we go back to what has been taken as initiative by Kofi Annan, there has been a UN mission in Syria in order to control and monitor the ceasefire and the situation of the citizens. We were achieving some progress. However, this mission was stopped, and they have given up after all those attempts by the regime to get them out. So why don't we proceed with taking another initiative like the one taken by Kofi Annan in order to take actual steps on the ground in order to make sure that there is a safe environment in Syria, in the parts of reconciliation?
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. أليس مفرج عضوة الهيئة التفاوضية السورية.
I am member of the negotiating authority, and I am part of the opposition. I would like to thank all the speakers and for shouldering this responsibility by saying what they have just said. But I want to make one observation. The clarification of concepts is very important. Many a time we used the term safe environment, but we should have said neutral safe environment, because the resolution by the UN, which is 2254, it means the minimum requirements, because creating a neutral environment as stipulated by these resolutions, and the completion of the release because of detainees, because this file is associated with the political solution. So we have to continue releasing the detainees and taking into account many criteria that might amount to 200, including the implementation of the political agreement And there are many legal, military, and steps in order to restructure the security organ in order for them to move in the future towards a neutral and safe environment. No process can proceed without a change. So we have to identify and define these terms. We cannot, the international community should not accept this arbitrary return. We have to say it is a neutral and safe environment that is associated with the political process. So Ms. Hala has mentioned the halting of shelling, but this doesn't mean that we have 4 parts of Syria instead of one. It has to be a unified, it has to be neutral, and it has to be just, and it has to be
Before going to Dr.
safe.
Just to clarify that I think that the concept of safe environment actually refers to calm, safe, and neutral environment as specified in the resolution. And also, very importantly, as I said, I have never seen such a detailed and precise document on over 50 pages, which defines every possible angle of what this means. Dr. Mazen, please.
مساء الخير. لدي سؤال لسعادة السفير أنهان.
I have a question to His Excellency Ambassador Anhan. You have mentioned the application of Resolution 2254 in a sound manner and in a correct way. What did you mean? As my question to Dr. Najat, we, the Syrians, believe that all those attempts to revive a political process have failed. Today, the situation in Syria proves what we're saying. And the last thing we heard was the step-for-step approach. The step-for-step approach. And this has been suggested between the regime and the international community. So where do we stand? We, the Syrians, where do we stand? Who's taking such decisions on our behalf? How could you reach this in the absence of the Syrians? Thank you.
أنا اسمي سمير تقي.
My name is Samir Taqi. I'm the director of a research center in Washington. We, at a certain point in time, we we went to the White House, and we were always told we have to go to Russia. And the US now, that it was completely wrong that we have been directed towards Russia. So it's quite clear that the US and Russia, they do not have a clear-cut policy that would lead to some progress, be it with regard to refugees or detainees or whatever. So I'm not criticizing Mr. Peterson, but I am criticizing the approach that directed us towards Russia, because they were controlling and monitoring the bridges and the checkpoints. How could we trust them with the distribution of food? And as you know, the Red Cross is not supposed to go through this. There was like an agreement between the US, Europe, and Russia. The second point, those who signed the Dara agreement, we have 221 detainees. How could we speak of a safe return? And nobody can say that the regime has pledged so and so or has promised. Even the Alawis, our people, they are the Alawis are leaving Syria through the Syrian coast. Why? Then it has to do with the nature of the regime. So without neutralizing the regime, nothing will be achieved. So, because the UN, I am a surgeon by profession, and I believe that we should not cover these injuries in order for the diplomats to come out and to say that we have achieved so and so, they cover other injuries. And this applies to Syrians, to Alawis, to Kurds. So playing with this issue means that this loophole will sustain and will continue.
Thank you. The last question from the room, from the gentleman behind.
I represented the opposition for 5 years. My question is the Syrian feeling safe between 2018 and 22? We are meeting today, and at the time we are meeting today, 3 Syrians have been killed in the south. The war was stopped by the opposition, by one party only. So anyone who can take a move or make a move would be killed. So there is complete silence by the media on what is happening in the south. So the second point, the UN has directly or indirectly contributed to the arbitrary displacement. We hope that the UN should supervise the return, especially from countries facing some economic difficulties. My question, could we have guarantees from the UN in order for the UN not to enter and be part of this game?
Okay. Well, as we can see that the majority of questions are for Dr. Rushdie as expected, but that also tells you we don't have an opportunity to ask these questions often. So as I said, you are lucky that this session is not, as I would like, 10 hours long. But let me give everybody opportunity to say their final words and comments, because I know that Dr. Hala also wants to respond to some. So please go ahead, and if you miss anything, I will remind you of the questions that were asked.
أنا لن أطيل وفي أسئلة ممكن لغيري يجاوب عليها، بس أنا حأضيف على بالنسبة
I will not be lengthy. the definitions, the conditions, the practical steps for a safe environment that are not mentioned in any of the documents. Many Syrians have been heard, and many practical steps have been taken in order for this term to be in conformity with the realities.
Again, I cannot miss the opportunity to stress that this is why this paper and this conference is so important, because for the first time it attempts to define what it means from the Syrian perspective. Michael.
I'm going to defer to speakers on my left, but basically I'm struck, Rafiq, by what you said and what I said earlier on. This is a really significant roadmap. And at a time when the political process is so stuck, and as you said, the Security Council is what it is, with all the problems we face, then this does provide an entry point for discussions both among Syrians, but between Syrians and the states that are most invested in this, in trying to find a solution. And I do take the ambassador's points about, we're not dealing with a nice bunch of people here in terms of intent to resolve the Syrian situation. So I really commend the Syrian Association again for doing this, and hope that it gets the oxygen and attention it deserves and is used to inject further density into the political discussions.
Thank you, Michael. And moving to Dr. Roshdi, then I will echo the question asked by Dr. Abdul Hamid Awak. Will the UN look at this document and take it into account as the Syrian point of view on what, in fact, safe environment means?
Thank you very much. Well, there were a number of questions. Is that the only question you want me to address?
No. I will remind you of all of them if you forget.
Okay, fine. Well, we will definitely, we received the document this morning. Just to be very clear. So the team did not have the time to go through it. And I suspect that there are a lot of commonalities with the IHL and with other things that actually are already in the resolution. And actually we take into account everything that we are getting from the Syrian. So just to keep it as a principle, and it's really a guiding principle for whatever we do. So that's my response to your question.
Okay. The other questions were, what is the reference in defining the safe environment in terms of what it means? Is it the international law or something else?
كان في مجموعة من الأسئلة، وهيدي إحنا المرجعية واضحة يعني
Our mandate is very clear for the UN. It's the international law. We are committed to international law, and of course, what is waited from us is to apply the international law. When it's not only with regard to humanitarian issues, but for human rights. And I believe that this is very obvious, as mentioned in the Security Council Resolution 2254. The second mandate, the UNHCR has laid down some clear points, and I believe that my colleague who will be speaking tomorrow will be available to answer any questions. Yes, the UN cannot take part unless these conditions are met. UNHCR submitted several documents with with the Syrians, with the displaced persons, as a way of protecting them. For us, protection is a must. It is our duty. And I fully understand your point, Doctor, regarding the monitoring and the coverage. In all the briefings submitted by the UN envoy, he said that the Constitutional Council should meet only and in all clarity. We want to work on the content. It's about time and not the constitution.
Let me then ask you one last before going to the ambassador, because we are already over time. So the question was, what is the step-for-step approach, and where are Syrians, displaced Syrians, in this process?
Well, the displaced Syrian have not been involved yet. I mean, just to be very, very clear and very frank and very direct. So I'm not going to package it the way you feel good. I'm telling you the truth. But there is a good reason for that. It's because it's really the beginning of a process. And the step for step, you have to understand all the concept of the step for step. The step for step is not here to replace any existing mechanism that is there. It's not replacing the Constitutional Committee. So, this perception that the special envoy is going ahead with that because there is a deadlock or a paralysis of the Constitutional Committee is not true. It's not correct. It's not coming to replace that. As you know, Resolution 2254 is a number of components. And step for step is part of the confidence building measures, which is very important. Just through the questions you have asked, it shows clearly that there is a huge trust deficit, which we fully understand, obviously. And it's really important to address it. And that's the starting point is how can we actually mitigate or address the trust deficit, and what are the steps or the issues or the files which actually would have the potential to help restore a bit of the trust. That's the first criteria.
Can I ask you, whose trust? Whose trust are you restoring?
It's trying. It's trust. It's different levels of trust. It's trust between the Syrian themselves, because that I am a witness of different conversations I had where it's not always easy, to bring them to trust each other. Which in terms of bringing a sustainable peace, it is very important that Syria lives together, right? And that there is something behind it to bring. And glue that will bring back Syrian together, because today there is a de facto division, and I think some of you here, refer to it. And in the resolution 2254, and as United Nations, there is no way for us not to stand very strongly for the territorial integrity of Syria, obviously. And we are not discussing any option of any division. That needs also to be very clear in our approach and the approach of the special envoy. So restoring the trust is between the Syrian. It's also restoring the trust in the institutions. It's not in the individual. We have really to make a difference between the institution and the individuals. In the institution, restoring the trust also for the international community, because there is a need at a certain stage to go beyond the humanitarian assistance and to go beyond the early recovery. You mentioned the reconstruction. Reconstruction is not on the table now. Let us be very clear, because the same way that the safe and neutral environment, the conducive, safe and neutral environment is not there actually to get into a massive return, the same environment is not there to get into reconstruction. إعادة الإعمار. إحنا هلا بنحكي على الإعفاء التعافي المبكر.
We are speaking now of a recovery, not reconstruction.
something that is impacting every Syrian, you know, and really improving their lives, and in doing so, helping indeed restoring this trust. And the third thing, it has to be definitely part of, on the one hand, facilitating or enabling the safe and neutral environments, you know, without promoting the return of the refugees, because we won't be able to participate to that unless actually the safe and neutral environment is there. I mean, I really need to be very clear about that. And while maybe the resolution itself is not having 10 pages to explain what is a safe and neutral environment, there are a number of documents which are actually very clearly stating what, from the point of view of United Nations, that actually were produced and developed by HCR and others, in consultation with the number actually of actors, what is the safe and neutral environment. Whatever is in the step for step is definitely compliant with this concept as per the United Nations, of course, you know, explanation. I think that the first thing I would ask, and I have many of my wonderful colleagues here, the first thing we'll do is really to try to compare actually between the document you came up with, which is a reflection of what the Syrian wants. And for me, this is the most important value added, and whatever concept and document we have, and we'll take it from there. Let me be very practical.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that this is in itself a contribution to the transparency of these conversations, and the document that we have, that we operate on right now, are the UN protection thresholds, and the discussion on that I look forward to in the next session. Ambassador, it is you to finish from the panelists.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm sure the document is very useful. I just had a glance at it, I read it, and I'm sure it has all the steps. I want to make 4 points here. One of them is Turkey, even though, I mean, we have very close social, historical, and cultural ties with Syria. As I said, we have a common border, geographic proximity, and we host the most number of Syrians in the world, 3.7 million. Now we feel a responsibility, that's for sure, and we'll not give up on this responsibility, that's also for sure. But what is also for sure is that it is not our problem only. It is the problem of the international community. Now, the European countries are very comfortable with the fact that the Syrians are mostly in Turkey. But when the doors were open, or they forced their way in, whatever, then they were very unhappy. Now, this crisis may make everybody very unhappy. So everybody has to put its hand under the stone, as they say. This is not a Turkey problem. This is not a Jordan problem. This is not a Lebanon problem. This is a problem for the international community as a whole. This is my first point. The second thing is, unfortunately, now international community is very much distracted. I mean, it has been distracted beginning 2015, I think, with the introduction, and I use this word on purpose, with the introduction of Daesh into the field. They have been distracted, and suddenly what the Syrian people went through and all the brutalities and everything, it was carried at the shelf. It was put on the shelf, unfortunately. Now, this distraction of international community must be brought back. Now, people are very sensitive in what is happening in Ukraine, in what is happening with the Ukrainians. So are we. But then I don't think that we can replace. I mean, now we have the Ukrainians, forget about the Syrians. That is not the case. There is a serious, a very serious, a very big human tragedy involving the Syrians, and the world should not be distracted about that. I mean, as long as it is far away from us, it's okay, is not an option really for anybody. My third point is somebody asked about what I meant by 2254. I meant that 2254, in fact, is a roadmap for a political solution. Now, there are references in this roadmap, and the references are, for example, the territorial integrity of Syria, all Syrian people, a part of the system, regardless of their ethnic or religious or whatever background and all that. These are the references. And then there are the definitions of the roadmap, and that includes the Constitution Committee, a new constitution, elections, how the power will be taken over, and so on. So we have everything in 2254. What we lack, as I said, is the political will to implement it. The fourth point is the return of Syrians cannot be, I think, treated as a separate item by itself, as if it hangs in the air independent of everything that's going on around. That is not possible, and that's not realistic on the other hand. So it should be a part of the package, a part of the comprehensive solution. And whoever is in Damascus must be a part of that. I mean, again, I think it is unrealistic to expect to go forward, to move forward in a concrete way without some collaboration or some, I wouldn't call cooperation, but some kind of interaction with whoever is in Damascus. And my last point is, the Syrians, having lived through what they lived through, are totally right in asking for guarantees, 100%. And I think, again, it's the international community who should be the guarantor, and it should be the United Nations who should play this central role in reaching this comprehensive solution, including the returns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Please join me in thanking the panelists, because this conversation contributes, as I said, to transparency, but to me it feels like it's the beginning of a very difficult conversation that is to follow. And I'm very happy that we have catalyzed it. We have run over time. Organizers can tell you about the lunch arrangements, but I think we need to be here at 2 o'clock. So see you.